self-funded through membership and through partnerships like Westchester University's Control Center, which is a partner in today's meeting, which is called the Startup Meetup. And it's every week from 9 to 10. And next week, I think, is Brandon, who might be coming by. Brandon's a local Ruby developer who's got plenty, I can talk plenty about it, but the thing that he's going to talk about is his new book on Ruby development, and he's generated a list for his newsletter that was a precursor to the book of about 600 people. So he's been doing the circuit around Philly, and we're excited. He's been an active part of the community. After that, and he just joined Mark's startup as CTO, which is really cool. And the week after that is Ryan
from Neomine Labs.
Finley. He's the founder of Neomine Labs, which is a Ruby development house in Philly. And then after that is Andrew Dinneman. And there's a space after that, and 2 weeks after that is a local developer works during the day at IMS Health, kind of a big data developer who will share some experiences he's had developing products. The other event that we have is Wednesday nights from 7 to 10. It's called Night Owls. Brandon spearheaded that, and that's been, it's like the antithesis of this meeting. No structure, beer, pretzels, sometimes pizza, and just sometimes it's a total social hour, 3 hours. Sometimes we do work, but we definitely collaborate, and there's been some really neat projects that have come out of that. Both are free, so feel free to come to all of them. This one, I forgot to mention, we're live streaming, I think, onto YouTube. And the whole presentation will be available probably right at the end because it reports directly to YouTube. So thanks to the Control Center and Monica Zimmerman for supporting this event, and for SCORE for helping out here, and Chester County Economic Development, and everybody in the community. So let me introduce George Krautzel from MissionOG Partners, or just MissionOG?
MissionOG.
It's a venture capital firm on the main line, and George is local, lives in Unionville, and he ran ITtoolbox through to its exit. And George came out about 8 weeks ago. I stalked him on LinkedIn, and he obliged, and then I convinced him to come back and share his story about ITtoolbox, but also about what he's doing now, because every startup that is here or comes through here, if they don't have traction when they get it, they'll be confronted with, do I bootstrap? Do I look financial? Do I go to a VC? And those are the answer. Feedback on that is crucial. So, did I miss anything?
Good to go.
Good to go. All right, so he's going to present for a little, and then we'll do a Q&A. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out this morning. So as Chris was mentioning, an entrepreneur, now an entrepreneur turned investor. Feel like it makes me a better investor to be an operator previously. When I'm sitting on the other side of the table with an entrepreneur, I've walked in their shoes. So I think that's an important part of being a good investor, is being able to understand that. If you can flip. So just some background on myself. 41 years old. As Chris mentioned, I live in Unionville. I have 4 kids. They're great. I enjoy being a father. For a while, my wife used to joke, was my 5th kid, which sometimes got the most attention. So we tried to right-size that a little bit. Grew up in Garnet Valley. Anybody from Garnet Valley area? No. Okay. But it's funny, when I lived there, it was, we call it Glen Mills, we call it Concordville. Now that high school's big enough, it's actually called Garnet Valley area. Went to Villanova, graduated in '94. Any Villanova grads? Okay, we're 0 for 2 here. It's all right. So coming out of school, I was a finance major at Villanova. Really wasn't sure what I was going to do. Ended up taking a job as an analyst for Andersen Consulting, and it was a great job coming out of school because I was able to be kind of thrown in the fire and get a ton of practical knowledge right away. I mean, it's funny, when you leave school, you're bold, you think you're going to make a difference, and then you get on a job and you realize you really don't know anything. So Andersen was great because it taught me a lot about prioritization, a lot about project management. You know, I got great experience. I mean, my first project, I was installing SAP systems and was working with controller of Colgate-Palmolive on how to, implement their SAP system to get the reporting needs for the company. For a 21-year-old kid, that's a great experience. I did that for 2 years and realized there was a heck of a market out there for independent SAP contract consultants in the mid-90s. Year 2000 was starting to creep up, and as long as you could sell yourself on a project, projects would take a year or two. So it was almost like a riskless type of move. So I went out, I started doing contract consulting, and was doing well enough with that where I started to build a consulting company, a boutique consulting company, where I was taking other people that were making a jump from the big five. I guess it was big six at the time. Now it's, I think, big four, and going out on their own. So we were doing that, and things were going well. And my partner with my consulting company came to me with this idea in 1998. And the way he described it to me, I understood the value right away. So what ITtoolbox was, it was an online community for IT professionals and executives where they could exchange best practice information. We felt like if we did our job, we made a workforce smarter, because basically we would have this community where professionals could go, and whether it was what product should I buy, or how do I support this product I just bought, or how do I manage this project, they could instantaneously tap into their peers and be able to exchange information and get that answer. That was kind of novel and unique at the time. In '98, we had started something where people really wouldn't call it social media for probably about 7 more years. So we're doing it. So we started doing it at night, doing consulting during the day, doing it at night. I had just gotten married. I was 25, and it was one of those, I think 2 months into being married, we started this, and I don't know if my wife knew what she got herself in for, but I would do consulting during the day, wake up, 7, go do consulting, come home at 5, have dinner with her for about half an hour, and then run upstairs and work till I fell asleep in front of the computer. And it was good. It was exciting. I mean, it was new. You felt like the world was pretty big, and we were taking it on really as a passion at first. We really didn't understand what the business model was going to be, but we started getting real traction. And about 6-7 months in, it went way beyond our own circles, and we were getting about 100,000 people coming by a month exchanging best practice information. So it was really starting to take off. And we thought, this is an interesting business, and advertisers came to us and said, we'd like to advertise. We tried to figure out what that was. So we said, what's advertising? Because we were IT professionals and we were coming at it from that standpoint. But what that did was it allowed us to actually create solutions that were pretty interesting for advertisers, because at the time, this was '99, people were building like buttons, and they were building, just kind of standard ads on a site that would sit there. And we kind of came at it a different way because we weren't media professionals. So we started building things with contextual advertising and demographic targeting, and it was new, and it worked, and it was interesting, and we built out a couple solutions like that. So we thought, this is worth investing in. This was something that somebody would want to invest in. And we took it to a couple of VC firms, and we got no traction at all with investment. I look back and say, okay, we're pretty young. We're 25. This was our first real business we were trying to do. And the hard part was everything was getting funded in '99. So, when we were getting a couple doors shut on us, we were like, wow, how does no one see this idea? This is such a big idea. But we decided to bootstrap it. We thought this is big enough, so we folded up the consulting company and we kind of went at it. And we grew off profitability. And it come 2001, when everybody really got extended, having a cash flow business was hard, but it was really good because we were able to kind of stay within ourselves. And we really focused on servicing the customer and making the customer happy, and that really provided value. So fast forward to end of 2006, 2007, We had built it up. We had 65 employees, had about 3.5 million people coming by a month exchanging best practice information. Our client base was like Microsoft and Oracle and IBM, and we had great clients. And we had been profitable for 7 straight years. We'd grown the company, like I said, bootstrapped it, and we were growing it through cash. MySpace sold to Fox, social media got a name, and all of a sudden, everybody wanted to know what we were doing and what we were up to. So we took a look and we said, we're doing this in IT, we could easily do this in other disciplines, HR, legal, finance, because it was knowledge sharing between professionals. But we were smart enough to know we weren't going to be able to do it on current cash flow. So we went out and we talked to a lot of people, and we ended up being acquired by a public company, CEB. I stayed on for 3 years to run it. And after that, kind of took a planned hiatus for a year where I kind of did a lot of catching up with my 4 kids and my wife. And in late 2012, started a new type of investment company where, there's 5 of us at MissionOG. And really, our idea is that company building comes from not only putting investment in, but also putting a shoulder in and applying our experience and our networks and our knowledge to what we know. So our fund, what we invest in is early and growth stage technology companies that are selling into the enterprise. And I've got some great partners, and we're pretty excited about what we're doing. So if you can flip. So that was a lot on me. I'm sorry. Who here would consider themselves an entrepreneur? Show of hands. Why?
I started a clothing line 4 years ago.
Why do you do it? Passion?
Absolutely.
How about you?
I like to build things, and I like to start something from scratch and make a business of it.
Good. Who else put their hand up? Why?
I just want to change something,
Okay.
and specific things, but I won't feel content. I'll feel a lack of self-worth by not contributing to some type of change in the world.
Okay. Love that answer. Go ahead.
Well, I actually ran a couple of companies, so experience.
Okay. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I love being an entrepreneur. It's really hard. Like, it's not something you would choose because you want a lifestyle, right? It's really difficult. So one of the things, I put together a couple slides just to kind of start the conversation with us. And the first is, and everyone in this room may be by it, but for those that are kind of on the fence, I never know kind of what the room is going to be. Like, sometimes I talk with people and they're saying they're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. They're thinking about starting something. So the 3 questions that I tell people to consider before doing that is, number 1, do you understand the market you're going to disrupt? So, and what I mean by that is, I just talked a little bit about my startup. I'd come from that industry. I was an IT consultant. I understood what the IT professional needed. I understood the pain point or the nerve in the market really well. So when a young company comes to me and starts to pitch me, one of the things I really look for right away is, are they from that industry? Are they going to be able to build something that disrupts a market that they already have knowledge about, or are they going to have to learn it? If the answer is they aren't coming from that industry, if they're trying to do it as an outsider without internal knowledge, it's just really hard. It's really hard to create something when you don't understand that nerve. So kind of the 3 things. Number 1 is, do you understand the market? Number 2, are you building a product or solving a problem? So when I hear a pitch, the first thing I say is like, what's the problem you're solving? And generally, you'll run into people that want to talk about, the product and, all the features and why it's going to be a great thing. But your product's going to change. Like, our product changed significantly from when we introduced it to what ultimately it was. And I would think probably around the room, I mean, Chris, you've built stuff in the past. Your product changes and changes significantly. So understanding the problem is the important part. What's the pain point? And what is a customer going to be willing to spend for to relieve that? And really having clarity about that. So it's start with the problem, then talk about the product that you're going to have. The number 3 thing before taking the plunge, can you commit to something that you're going to fail at most of the time? And that's why I said, like, I'm an entrepreneur. I love being an entrepreneur. Like, I don't wish it upon anybody from a standpoint of, there's a curse. I mean, it's that visual of that, that guy pushing the boulder up the mountain, and then it just rolls back down at the end of the day, and just getting back out there. I mean, to be an entrepreneur, I think it's I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing or whatever you want to call it, but you need to be that person that jumps out of bed in the morning and knows that you're going to go problem solve, and probably a majority of the time you're going to be wrong. I mean, if you look at numbers, starting a company, doing a startup, like the numbers aren't in your favor. Like you have to be willing to know that you're going to fail a majority of the time. And that's something that, takes a special kind of person, a special kind of thing. And that's where, really kind of going into it and getting a good understanding. So, when I talk to people about these 3 questions, and if their answer isn't yes to I understand the market, and they're not solving a problem, and they're not willing to fail, generally I say, maybe you're not ready yet to be an entrepreneur, but that's not a bad thing. A good thing is go work for a company in that market that ultimately you want to disrupt. So you get learnings from the inside on how to do it, or go work for a startup and just see what it's like. Because, that failing, the harder part with that is that gets so much harder once you have employees. And then once you have investors, oh man, it's really hard. So, just before taking that plunge, that's an important thing to consider. So we wanted to talk a little bit about traction. I think that's what a lot of the QA. So I just want to make some real quick notes on just things that I thought of or have learned. Because once you start getting traction, that's when it actually comes to like building a company. Before that, you're tinkering, you're experimenting, you're in a back room somewhere, you're just trying to figure it out. Once you start to actually become a business, it gets a bit scary, because now you think, okay, how do I build this? How do I make sure that I can really do this? So some things to consider. One is get the right people on board. This is something I didn't understand at 25 when I started a company. Like, I actually thought I was going to solve everything. I actually thought I'm smart, I have capacity, I understand, I'm going to be able to do it. You quickly start to realize you can't scale yourself. So above everything, you really need to find people. You need to find people, and you need to find great people. And your job as leading a company is to be recruiting all the time. Even when you don't have positions available, just be recruiting all the time. Get good people in your network, because you're going to need them if you're successful. But that's a realization that, like I said, it sounds logical, but when you're in the moment, you don't realize it enough, is that you end up being the barrier to the growth if you have to solve everything. You're the bottleneck. Second thing is start to understand your growth levers. Start to understand what will create scale in the business, whether it's, how sales activity translates to orders, whether it's user adoption, whether it's your use of technology and being able to build out a specific technology. Every business has levers. It's really important that you quickly understand them so that you're able to put pressure on the right things. Third thing, and this is one that we tried to do with all of our companies pretty early on, is start building dashboards. Like, you can't get better at something if you don't track it. So once you start to get traction, you really have to start looking at what are your levers, and then what activities actually create value for you. So we pretty early on try and install a discipline with the companies that we work with to be able to have dashboards. They're not going to be right out of the gate, just like our product where we talked about and said your product's going to change, your dashboard's going to change a lot. But at least if you know or at least if you have an idea, like, these are the things that can move my business, and then start to measure them, and then be able to make decisions or changes based on those numbers that you see, or adjust those metrics. Those are important parts. This is starting to institutionalize your business. So, we're going to talk a lot about traction in the QA. This is part of it. The part of it is like, how do you get to be a company? You get to be a company because you start to build process and operation under it. And that's number 4. Like, don't fear process. Like, process is actually a really important thing for a business. I mean, it doesn't sound sexy. I mean, process sounds really boring, and process sounds like, oh no, that's kind of, when you talk to some entrepreneurs, like, I wanted to get away from process. That's why I started doing something. But that's going to prevent you from scaling. Again, if you think of number 1, you have to get people on board to help you. The best way to help those people then is to have some defined process, or at least give them the ability to create some process around it. Process means scale. And, it's important to be able to build that. And then the last one, I don't know why I have a number 1 bullet for that, I guess because I thought it was really important. Just execute. I mean, you really just keep, so now you've got kind of, you start thinking, I've got a team, I've got process, I understand my levers. and now I've just got to really hit it hard, and I've just got to continue to hit it hard. But that's how traction's created with a company. I mean, there's a lot of nuance between each one of those, and we can get into that, but that's what's really important to get, and that's where you're going to get from a couple of people with a great idea and some customers to an actual company. We flip. One other thing I want to comment on before we start to get into Q&A. So things to think about with funding, because I think that's the second part of this conversation. I can at least lend some perspective of somebody who actually has bootstrapped a company and didn't take funding to now somebody who is actually providing funding for companies. I think number one, do you really need outside capital? Like, I can't stress enough how much of a distraction it can be. You know, it's something that it's great, it's fuel if you figured it out and you figure out how to apply it. But, you know, you do start spending time managing investors and managing, you know, things outside of the business. And that can be difficult sometimes for an entrepreneur to do. But start to look at it and say, you know, can I do it? Can I do it through bootstrapping? Can I do it through cash flow? Can I find a local angel that believes in me that's going to be able to add some value to it? And, you know, think about it. Do you really need capital? Make that consideration. Number two, is your industry one that actually attracts venture? You know, like there's certain industries that it just doesn't make sense from a venture standpoint. They're more lifestyle businesses. And when I say lifestyle, that's not mean to be derogatory at all. I mean, but they're cash flow businesses. They're businesses that can really scale into good businesses, but they don't need really outside investment because outside investors aren't really going to go into them anyway. You know, real estate's a good example. I mean, it's not something that is necessarily ever going to be venture-based. What's your market size? And will it produce venture-like returns? Most ventures are going to want to see a 10x return potential. You know, so start doing the math on your market size and say, you know, what's my market? And if I capture 5% of it, is there going to be enough return here in order to do it? I mean, be honest with yourself. Be honest with your math on how to do it, but know your math too. I mean, that's what that we'll look at. We'll say, what's the size of the market based on the problem that you've defined? And then what's winning would be 5%, just say 5% of that market. What would that look like? What size company would that be? You know, what would the valuation of that company be? And then figure out if that would have venture-like returns. You know that. Given traction and where you're at, will investors find it appealing? There's a too early to go out and spend time on it. And I've seen too many companies spend way too much time trying to get investment where it's just tire spinning. Like they haven't built the proof points up enough where it's going to be attractive to somebody to put money into it. And they're trying like heck to, we're taping, so I'm going to be nice. They're trying their best to, you know, create appeal and say this is something that's worth investing in. But the bottom line is they haven't hit those proof points yet. So just know your stage, know if you've been able to get there, and then make sure that it's time worthwhile spending. And then like, last one is like, why do you want outside investors? You know, just think about it, because like, you know, I think that I always say customer money is so much more valuable than investor money, because customer money is sustainable. Where, you know, investor money, you have to keep going back to it, and you're giving away pieces of your company to get that, and that's something that, you know, you have to really understand and think about. But, you know, why do you want outside investors? Outside investors should be more than just money. Like they should be either expertise, be able to help you open doors through commercialization. There's a lot of good reasons to go get outside investors outside of money. If your only answer is I want something, some entity to fund it, my suggestion would be figure out if there's a way for you to do that, you know, outside of it. If not, you know, put together a really good plan, but just be honest with yourself on what you're going to be looking to do. What are you looking to get out of it? So those are the things for funding. I think that's it for things that I had prepared. Look forward to hearing everybody's questions and talking through.
So for Q&A, please do a quick introduction, like 5 seconds, and then I'll kind of move around.
My name's Henry Ventura. I work here with Chris. I do a lot of web development. I'm really interested in programming and developing my knowledge of software. So in the thick of things, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, you know, a year or two to discern, this is on topic of dashboards, to discern what should I be keeping track of, because when you're just starting out, everything's sort of this fog around you and everything's equally as important. Any tips on what helped you discover what was sort of key to keeping track of?
Yeah, I think we made a determination that there was going to be certain things that were more important than others. And generally for us, we started to get to understand, at least I'll put in the context of my business and then let's go broader on it. But with ITtoolbox, we're an online community. So we had to think of it by saying, how are dollars coming in, which were advertising dollars? But then the big thing, the big fuel was actually users coming by, interacting, that was creating not only content and creating engagement, but was creating ad inventory. So our levers started to go around like how many people are coming, like early on, like really, really broad type of things like, volume, engagement, from the user base, how much content they were contributing, how they were getting there, that type of thing. From the advertiser side, we're looking at it and saying, okay, what was the interaction rate with particular ad units, what was causing greater engagement. As we started going then, we started refining, because you start to like look at numbers over a period of time and you start to say, all right, really, what's the story behind that number in the dashboard? Because what the dashboard does is it just creates questions. It creates questions where you start to see spikes or you start to see changes, and you start to say, okay, well, what changed in our process, or what changed in our activity that we're able to create it? And then you start to refine it and start to get to several layers down. So after doing it for some period of time, your metrics are going to be so much different than when you started with. But I think start broad and just start measuring, and I think you're going to naturally start to question what's really behind that number, because that's not the metric, it's really something down here, so you can start to figure out root cause of things.
Good question. Who's next? George?
Hi, I'm George Edwards. I'm now with Chester County SCORE, but I spent 30 years on Wall Street as an institutional investor, arm wrestling with investment bankers, structuring deals. This sector of the capital markets is still kind of a mystery to me. So how do you identify your potential investors? Where do they come from? How do you run into them? What's the screening process?
Okay, so let me make sure I answer correctly. So from the end of, if I'm an entrepreneur, how do I understand my potential investors? Was that
where do they come from? How do you find them? Do you like to be introduced? Do you go out and network? How do you screen them once you are introduced to them?
So I think part of that then is like, first come up with a strategy on what you want from a dollar standpoint. And like I said, there's additional values. You may say that I'm really looking for someone to be money plus, where they come in and they provide really active advice that I can do it on. And then what you're going to naturally go to is, obviously that's going to then lead you to who are people that know this space, who are people that have built companies in this space previously, and then you start to put together a hit list based on that. I always like a kind of a surgical approach with this, where you start to think about like who is really going to add value, because you can go get money from anywhere. Now, again, saying that you're going to be successful, but you can go get money from anywhere. Who's really going to add value to your business? Through their experience, through their networks, through their ability to just sit down with you and tackle a problem, and then start to build a hit list out with that. Generally, what I would then do is figure out who those parties are. There's so many tools out there. LinkedIn's a great one, where you start to see like who do I know that's connected to this person that can make that kind of introduction, and try and seek that warm introduction, to them. I think that's a good way of going about it. Rather than taking kind of a shotgun approach where you just start to say, I'll talk to anybody who's interested in me. Obviously, that's maybe a last resort type of thing, but with the tools with social networks now, your ability to get a lot of intelligence about potential investors, like what they've done before, what they're experienced in, who they're connected to. You can do your research a little bit even before talking with people. So I would kind of go that approach.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, are you asking how George gets his deal flow, or how the entrepreneurs find him first?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I answered the latter. Okay, so
That was good.
it was good to answer. All right, so let me try again. Okay, so how do we find investments? There's a couple of different ways for Mission right now. One is people that just went through that process that I just talked about that are approaching us, right? Second is we've built some really good relationships with people in the field, and actually for us, since we're doing early and growth stage investing, we have companies that come in later that may see something that may be too early for them. And they're looking at it and saying, we really like this. Maybe go talk to these guys at Mission, get them some momentum on going up with it. Third is we get a fair degree of proprietary deal flow. Using that first example I just talked about, one of my partners, a guy by the name of Gene Lockhart, he's the ex-CEO of MasterCard. He's done plenty of investing in kind of the fintech, fin services space. So like he's one of those people that people want to get in front of. So we get the opportunity to see things that way. We'll go to events and we'll run into people there. We'll see something, we'll see a business plan, we'll start keeping up to speed. For us, there's a couple of touches before we start to really get interested, because we want to kind of see, what they're up to, what they're about, what their background is, traction that they've seen. And then as they get to know us, we start to see as the story kind of unfolding as they think it would be. And that's just a bit of advice for you as, when you go out and talk with people, I would network early. So let's say you make a determination that you're going to do some fundraising and you're going to raise funds and you've figured out that you need it in 9 months. You can go friends and family and stuff like that, and you can do with some angels, but you really want to go get some institutional money in 9 months. I would build a plan for that where you start touching those people early. And maybe say, I'm not even raising yet, I just want to get to know you. But when you go in and you have that discussion with people like me, tell me the 3 things that you're going to accomplish over the next 6 months. So then when you call me back in 3 months, you can say, I've made progress on these things. And that way you're starting to build a rapport where you're starting to say, like, I'm the type that tells you what I'm going to do and then comes back in and delivers it. I think that's really valuable. We like those types of people where we can start to get to know them a little bit and start to see their operational background. So from your answer on deal flow, some of it's proprietary. Some of it is people just reaching out in general to us. Some of it is we're shaking trees a little bit and finding things in areas that we know about and refer. That's really how we're getting it right now.
Can you maybe give the crowd an idea of what you're holding now, the companies that you're invested in?
Yeah, so there's 3 companies that we're in right now. There's a couple that we're in diligence with, but the 3 companies we're holding now, one is a company called Peoplelinx, and just some background on those. It's a couple of guys from LinkedIn who realized that there was a heck of an opportunity to go out there and build services around getting people to understand LinkedIn better. In fact, they left LinkedIn and they started a services company. And they were doing consulting services and helping some of the largest companies out there understand, getting their executives to understand LinkedIn better. And kind of their moment of truth, I think they were training EMY or they're training someone like that. And they just had like a 50-person training session, and they're all like high-fiving afterwards because it went real well. And like guy came up to him and said, like, that's great that you trained 50. How do you train 50,000? And they were just like, oh man, it's not a services company. It's a software application. So we got involved with them pretty early. I'm on their board. We're in their seed round. Then we did their A round with them. And they were why we liked them so much is they were. Again, this gets back to one of my bullets, like, do you understand the market you're going to disrupt? They were providing services, and then it made sense to kind of make it a platform for companies. So companies now use it for not only social readiness and getting their employees ready on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter, but also from a content management standpoint, now that they're ready, how they can disperse it to their individual employees. So that's one. There's a company called Cloudamize that's in Philadelphia that does back-end as a service, and really what their value prop is that they can help companies develop mobile apps in half the time and half the cost, because they've already done the whole back-end. So a company can concentrate on really just doing the front end of the application and just go so much faster with it, and they provide a lot of value that way. Third company that we're in is a company called Cloudamize, and what Cloudamize has done is they've built an application that helps companies understand their cloud infrastructure better. So what they can do is they have 2 different applications. One is if a company's on premise or in a data center, they can kind of measure the workloads and they can project what that's going to look like in Amazon Web Services. So a company can really understand their cost before going. Right now, there's not a tool set out there. It's kind of either people are doing like machine-to-machine match, or they're just guessing, on what their cloud spend is going to be. But as cloud starts to get more into like small, medium business and enterprise, it's going to be really important that companies are able to plan for what those expenses are going to be. That's going to be one of the ways that they jump over. And then once they jump over to the cloud, they can run this application that allows them to continue to refine it. One of the things they talk to customers about is for AWS itself, there's 12 million different settings for AWS if you look at all the different configuration options. But you think about it, there's only one that's right for their business, which means best performance at lowest cost. They help companies find that one. You could do it by hand, or you could do it yourself, or you could use an application. And I think that they've really got something with an application that people can use. So those are the companies that we're in right now.
Well, I have a question. When a company is that kind of company that's doing something that nobody else is doing, is that a large variable, or does that matter a lot more than a lot of other things? Because right now it seems like if you're the first person and you have the ability to do something, there's a window where if you get it done, you'll own it. But if you wait 6 months,
yeah, and that gets to that question of like, is it a venture model? Is your company in like a venture industry or venture market? For that example, it would be, because like the reason why they need to raise capital is they need to move faster because an opportunity exists. A lot of times as an investor, you have to make sure, is it really an opportunity that they've proven out? Is there, have they, at least at the feasibility stage where they have a couple customers paying that have validated it, or do they think it's an idea, that is going to be? And that's an important part of kind of like when looking at a potential investment. But yeah, I mean, that's a great case where outside investment and outside capital is important because they've got an idea. It's not that it's novel. It's not that, others aren't going to innovate. They have to just innovate faster to not only bring their product to market and scale, but also to stay ahead of the curve. And I think it's a good example where, capital is important to go get.
Hello, my name is Andrew Schwab. I'm a technology entrepreneur. And question that, by the way, I work with Peoplelinx.
Nice. How do you work with them right now?
.io.
Oh, good.
And so the question I have for you is, I mean, a lot of really junior people who are wanting to get into starting their own business around technology, sometimes not. How would you encourage or discourage them that Kickstarter is the right way to do it? Because their perception a lot of times is, well, it's too much work to go find an angel investor, so why not just do Kickstarter? How might you comment on something?
God, I haven't had too much experience with it to really give you a good, knowledgeable, like, do these things with Kickstarter to be successful. I think it's really interesting, the idea of being able to access capital and get capital. The hard part with a Kickstarter type of thing from an investor standpoint is, who's really doing the diligence on the idea, how thorough you can be to really be able to discern, is this something that is investment worthy or not? I don't know all the rules that a company has to play by to, be eligible for Kickstarter and what the kind of the restrictions or constraints are for it. So I would need to understand that a bit more to be able to answer that. I think it's interesting. I think the ability to get capital, I think it works for certain things. Like if you're raising $10,000 or $15,000, I think that's interesting. I think if you're looking to raise a couple $100,000 or something like that, I think there's a lot of value in finding either an experienced angel or institution that can be more than just money, which Kickstarter would only be. So I guess for a certain industry, if I've got something that only needs a finite amount of capital to get going and it's a pretty low amount, I think it's probably a good option, to consider. If it's something like the idea that we're talking about, like a technology company that has like a bit of a head start, but it's going to become a crowded market, I don't know if that's a viable way to really scale it.
So maybe like a physical product that wouldn't traditionally be like attractive to venture capitalists.
Yeah, I think ideas like that. So industries that aren't going to appeal to an institutional investor, I think it's a great option to try and get that if you can get it. I tend to think sometimes people think it's easy to do because it's just easy to get or sign up. And nothing's easy, right?
Everything has baggage.
Yeah.
Andrew's the founder of Point.io, by the way.
All right.
Monica?
Hi, I'm Monica Zimmerman from the Counsel Center. So I have a question as far as structuring the equity before coming to you or one of your colleagues in PC. What would you recommend that the equity arrangements look like in terms of the friends and family and then the angels? So a lot of angels don't want to face dilution and have the next round. So.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple different thoughts that pop in with that question. One is from a valuation standpoint, generally angels, most local angels I know would want to structure it as debt, as convertible debt, because generally when they're coming in, it's really hard to establish a valuation for the company. You're investing more in an idea or a promise than something that actually has proven out viability. So generally you'll see convertible debt where they can put a cap and a discount rate on, and then once institutional investors come in, then that valuation gets established and the angel gets rewarded for coming in early. That's generally how I've seen it. I mean, as far as a priced round with it, it's a back and forth, it's a give and take. I mean, there's no science in setting a valuation. When I would take that step, I would think of a few things like understand, like, is this your last raise or is this one of many? And if it's one of many, how much more money is going to be needed? Like, have a game plan at least. I'm not saying it's always going to go to that game plan, but understand. So like, you're going to do a friends and family round, and then maybe you're going to do a seed round, and then maybe you're going to do an A round. What's your equity look like after that? So just do some structured planning that way. The other part that I think is really important for young companies to get right is like, what's your employee options pool going to look like? Like anyone that comes in, like I'm going to ask to have that done before my money comes in. That way it doesn't dilute my money. So think about from a standpoint of how you're going to structure your employee options pool so that you're giving enough of a carrot for your early employees to feel like they're vested in the company, and there's some structure behind that as well. So I would think of it from both ways. I don't know if that answered your question exactly.
Who does that, though? I mean, if you're in your situation, you have half a dozen guys who know IT, but how do you do that?
So if I'm an individual entrepreneur, and the support structure for entrepreneurs is a lot better than it was even 10 years ago. So Philly has like Philly startup leaders, and there's a couple of local groups where entrepreneurs are commonly interacting with other people just like them. So the ability to get peer advice, and it's kind of be careful what you wish for sometimes because you're going to get a lot of opinions, but the ability to network and get advice is so much better than it was 10 years ago. And that's kind of what I think Walnut Street Labs can do too, as far as you're having a hub where a bunch of entrepreneurs are getting together. So before taking that step, go get some experience-based opinions on what's the best way to do it. I find that like no matter if I'm going to be someone's investor or not, if someone approaches me with like kind of what do you think I should do, I'll absolutely give them 30 minutes or an hour to help them think through that. I mean, I think that's part of my job is to kind of give back with that kind of thing. And I think you'll find most people in the space are going to want to do that because they understand that they were there at one time too. So there's a bit of kind of providing that kind of advice. I don't know, how you went through. How did you go through it?
It took multiple iterations, early stage failing, followed by a decision that I can't do it all myself, to bring in the best people I could find and be willing to cut off big chunks of equity to them in order to ensure growth to the next phase. And you're absolutely right. I think Philadelphia is an extraordinary region where people at every level of investors, from angels to community people to VCs, incubators, accelerators, all those people want to engage in discussion for multiple reasons. Number one, they want to give back, but they also want to hear the news on what's on the street, what's coming up, to see whether or not they can make a connection and get involved. Right? So there's interest at all levels.
And it's so much better than it was when I started. Like just volume of information, whether it's stuff you can go online and engage with people and find people, or local groups, such as this one or Philly Startup Leaders. I mean, it's just there's an awareness of, hey, there's a lot of other people trying to do this. And I think collectively as a community, I think there is a rising tide lift all ship type mentality where it's like if we can make Point.io better, and if we can make Peoplelinx better, and if we can make Artisan better and Cloudamize better, it's going to be better for all of us in the area.
And that was my thought behind Walnut Street Labs, is it would be easier to get stories about everyone in here if there was one place where we could all be. And we got covered by Technically Philly, and then immediately thereafter, one of the companies got covered, and I was like, yeah, that's the whole point of it. And I'd say half the people in this room started off with a 15-minute conversation, and then they've been supportive. And Bob Fedor from SCORE is my neighbor, and there was just across the fence kind of something also with him. But Monica, if you could introduce yourself a little and talk about the Control Center, I think that would be helpful. And then we'll move on to the next question. It's getting close to 10, so we'll probably take 2 or 3 more.
Hi, I'm Monica Zimmerman. I'm a professor in the management department at Westchester University, and we have the Entrepreneurship Center named after Dr. Edwin Cottrell. The center focuses on entrepreneurship, trying to help students become entrepreneurially literate, use that term, to introduce them to concepts and things to we sponsor some various activities. We work with the ITtoolbox, which is the County Economic Development Council with SCORE, and now we're happy to be working with Walnut Street Labs. We also are part of, we're an educational partner of the Keiretsu Forum, which is an angel investment group in Philadelphia. And we have a business idea competition coming up, which the ideas are due on March 27th. And if you have any connection with SCORE in terms of being a client or having sought advice from SCORE, you can apply.
I think we've had 1 or 2 people apply from.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. So we have some cash prizes, some advising, and we're hoping to set up the top prize winner would have an opportunity to accelerate career at Walnut Street Labs. So we're excited about that. We have an internship program where we will place students in internships with early stage companies, including the ITtoolbox companies. And so if you're looking for an intern, we will pay for the student to work in an internship in your company, 180 hours, and that's been a real nice opportunity.
You have one?
Yep.
Brad? And we also have another intern, Ben, from Graduate Psychology.
And we occasionally will do consulting projects. I think we worked with their
Westchester LLC.
Yes, with Westchester LLC, and then to do some early stage research on the
Uptown Entertainment Alliance.
Yeah. So that's a real great opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm Bob Fedor, and I'm Chris's neighbor.
Nice.
George, as an investor, what's your attitude toward IP? Do you encourage, or is the time frame so short? Is the competitive environment so dynamic that it doesn't make sense? Where do you stand now?
It really depends on the space. There's certain things that I think are protectable. There's certain things that you can spend a lot of money and spin tires trying to protect, and it's just really going to be difficult to do. Tend to not really give a ton of valuation credit, as far as, their potential just based on IP. I think IP is important to have. IP, when it's unique and really valuable, is important to try to protect. I think one of the flip side of IP is that in order to protect it, let's just say you go and you try and get patents for it, and then you get patents awarded. The amount of money you have to spend to defend it's pretty high too. So I think you have to really ask yourself, is it worth the time, effort, and distraction? One of our companies has really interesting IP and good IP that I think is worth defending. Others, it's more of a, can they out innovate others in the space? So it's not necessarily as important to sit there and try and protect things because the amount of time spent on that versus actually operating a company would not be the right use of resources. So I think it really depends on where it's at. If it's really kind of technology heavy and technology structure, there might be some uniqueness to it where it's worth defending.
Certainly, it's important to the company you want to sell to.
Yeah, no, and it definitely can be. I just think that the flip side of it is, and the thing that isn't talked enough about is like, if you do get it and there is some kind of potential infringement on it, generally you're going against someone who has much deeper pockets than you do. So I think there's important steps to take to try and protect. But I wouldn't use it as something where I start devoting a lot of time and energy to it unless that's the reason why someone's going to acquire them. Yeah.
Andrew, can you comment on that?
Sure, yeah, and the relevance, the reason why Chris is asking me to say something is because I've written multiple patents here in the last 10 years. And my comment would be, generally, if it's very high-tech, very intellectual, makes other people's heads explode when you try to explain it to them, then generally that's like the first indicator that you might be at a place where it's something that's worth protecting at a patent level. The cost is astronomical, especially for an individual. And trying to get it done after funding, probably whoever funded you is going to own you. So there's a fair amount of risk involved with how you want to do that. The decision of whether to do it or whether not to do it, I generally go for the brain explosion criteria. If it's so deep that most people have a hard time getting to it, but you can really articulate how it solves problems, then I think it's worth exploring.
And what's your name?
Angeline May. I'm a marketing communications consultant. I've worn different hats in Westchester, worked with a private equity firm, and founder and board member of the Entertainment Alliance. My question is, you've talked about you need the willingness to fail, and I'm curious your perspective on some of the red flags that come up sort of generally or within a time frame, and what some of the remedies that you've faced or considered, what you would advise entrepreneurs to do, and sort of not, to end on a high note maybe instead of a low note, what can you, when is it time sort of to take a step back or sideways, or any comment or thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I guess I'll answer it one way and tell me if you want me to be more specific with it. But I think that's part of we started talking about you're starting to get traction, and now you're starting to try and institutionalize it. And I think an important part of that is now you're starting to set expectation. You're putting together a budget. You're putting together metrics. You're putting together, this is what we're going to execute on. You then need to, keep yourself in check and do a regular review of it, whether you have a board or not. Maybe it's just an internal management meeting. But you keep yourself in check. Are we hitting the goals that we established out there? If not, why? Do we think that something is here, but actually it should be moved over here? I think failure is a good thing, because failure, that kind of tapping into that nerve of failure. One, if you're not failing, it means you're probably not trying hard enough. That's one, that you have to think about. But the second thing is, that's where I think real innovation comes, because I think to think that you're going to get it all right away is just, that's naive.
So that essentially, perhaps you're looking at, this portion, we have a goal and a strategy and an implementation plan, but that didn't work. But we build into our overall plan for some of those
Yeah, I think if you looked at a product roadmap from my company, the product roadmap 5 years in, looking backwards, looked a heck of a lot different than the product roadmap coming in and looking out 5 years. I think it's just because you start to say I'm going to listen to the market. I'm going to listen to my users and my customers. They're really going to validate my idea or not? And an entrepreneur is a really funny thing, because a leader has to be confident and steadfast in that they have the right direction, but they also have to be willing to kind of bend sometimes. And it's a really it sounds like a contradiction, And I think if not done right, it can be. But I think it's a really important thing that you have to believe in what you're doing. Like, you have to believe that this is going to make a difference. This is going to solve a problem. But you can't be so blind to change and not admit, like, okay, look, we were going this way. If we just go this way, it'll be better. That you end up getting in your way. So I think for me, the most part, to answer your original question is, like, know that you're not going to get it all right, but at least find a way to keep score. And that's why I said the dashboard type of thing. So you're keeping yourself honest, because if you're constantly missing what you're setting out to do, either you're just wrong or you have a team that you just can't adapt. And neither one of those are good things.
I kind of like to suggest that failure maybe be reconceptualized as animal instincts, because I sometimes think a good entrepreneur just makes something out of anything that happens, right? You're taking more information and you're moving over here, you're moving there. And I was talking to my wife and I uttered some expression like, every day we move 10 yards down the field, like, that's success. Like, we're moving. And it's funny to have a sports metaphor for me, but I think it makes sense. Some way, every day, we're going to move 10 yards down the field. Elliot?
Hi, my name is Elliot. My company is a cloud-first services company, so I help others move to the cloud and do tech support and build business apps in the cloud. I don't develop products per se. I consider the service as a product. Do you find that from funding, it's more difficult to get funding for services companies versus product companies?
Yeah, and I think it is. It's just because from a standpoint of, I think a product with a services component is really important. Like, one of the dirty secrets I like to say is, like, software as a service company start off as a lot of service and not a lot of software, and then they kind of morph in as they start to learn. But, bottom line is, like, from a valuation standpoint, your services, you're going to get like 1 times, where a product you're going to get 7 times. So from an investment standpoint, you're going to want to see something productized so that it can actually open up scale. That's really what it is. That's not to say services businesses aren't good businesses. In many ways they are, and like I shared, like, the example with Peoplelinx, where it was a services business and they pivoted to a product. So something like yours, like, if you were saying, hey, this is something I'm thinking about, I think you're going to have insights on what product to create to kind of scale that service that you're doing right now that takes time. And I value that. I think that people coming from that industry, coming from an industry, having a service and morphing into a product is so valuable. But I think you have to also ask yourself, like, why do you want to go out and get investment? Because if you're a services business, is it an ability for you to run it as like a cash flow business and be tremendously successful with it, or do you need investment really to scale it?
Yeah, I've been at the cusp of growth for about 6 months now, so I'm trying to get over that and find the reasons why I have to get and find the best way to get it.
Yeah, I just think in your instance, you'll find potential investors. I think when it comes to like an institutional VC, they're going to want a much larger multiple on the way out to make the business case to do the investment, to take on the risk. And if it's just pure services, they know that multiple is going to be hard to get.
One more question. I think you have.
Yeah, I have a question. I run a company that does fundraising and the auction, so it allows a non-for-profit to run an auction using their phone, do a bid with their phone. And I just wanted to go back to your first slide, which had to do with finding good people, because that's not employees, that's actually your core group. And those are your really special people. And if you've kind of developed something all by yourself, like I'm kind of seeing it all by myself, but now it's time to go out and meet the real, how do you find these good people, what is that, and then how do you, what do you offer? And
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate with both my startup and the fund I've created, that I've had really good partners, like, off the bat. I think that's very, very important from a business standpoint. It doesn't mean you can't do it alone. It's just from personal standpoint. I've been with people that are just exceptional, and that's really helped from that standpoint. I think if you're an individual and you're saying, how do I scale it? I think it's important for you to inventory what your needs are. Like, what are you good at? And what are you not good at? And then start to think about, for like key team members, do they have, the skill set and experience and the personality to fit kind of that need that you have. And I think networking with, going back to networking, I think it's so much better than it was, 10 years ago, because you can find, like, quote unquote a technical co-founder. And there's a bunch of different names for things right now, but you can go find people like that are actually looking to meet people like you, where they say, hey, I'm a really good operator. I'm trying to find a good idea that's already there, and try and find somebody where I can plug myself into it. And there's a lot of networking things out there to do that. So I would say that start with inventory, kind of, what you need from a standpoint of where there could be something that either accelerates a skill that you have and experience, or it provides a gap. And then I think you got a basis of kind of what you should target.
All right, well, let's wrap it up, and usually we hang out for a little while, so feel free to do that. Thanks, George. Might have coffee left, not sure. Water and beer in the